Hey everyone, my name is David Dunbar, or the Theme Park Evangelist. So I do sincerely apologize that last weekend, last Sunday to be specific, I did not get a chance to do a live stream like I normally would. Unfortunately, I came down very hard with the flu. How sad is that? So, my aunt and uncle were in town from Ontario, Canada. And for those of you who are joining, I promise I will get to the discussion of the day in just about 5-10 minutes. I just wanted to go over just a couple of things. So, what I normally do whenever I start a live stream, I like to spend the first 5-10 minutes catching everybody up, especially since I haven't done a live stream in about 2 weeks. So there's going to be a little bit more to talk about, and then I get into the actual discussion. So anyway, my aunt and uncle, yes, were in town from Ontario, Canada. So that was one reason why I possibly was considering not doing it. And I ended up having a lot more time than I anticipated. So last Thursday night, not this past one, but the week before that, we went with them to a German restaurant, which is ironically the last YouTube video that I actually filmed. We went to a German restaurant in Newport, Kentucky, and I filmed the band that was performing that night. And then after that, we pretty much went back. I went to work the next day. The next day, I had to be in at 8 in the morning. That week was exceptionally busy. That was the very first week I had to go back to the Creation Museum, which was nice. And they decided to start me off early. That was also my very first day in culinary was the very next day, so that also makes sense why I had to go in early. So the next day I got up early. I got to the Creation Museum and I had an hour-long meeting with the assistant manager, who I assume has been on vacation all this past week, so he should be back this coming week, this week that we're going into, that is. And he told me how he remembers the last time, or the time when he got to sit down and have the same discussion with my dad and also my brother. So that was kind of cool. And then I found out that the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter are eventually switching to Coke products, which is kind of cool. So this actually coming weekend, April the 1st, and no, this is not an April Fool's joke, I promise. This is something they've actually been talking about for about 2 years now, pretty much ever since I started with Answers in Genesis. So this is huge that Answers in Genesis is going back to Coke products after being with Pepsi products for the past several years, you could say. Pretty much ever since the Ark Encounter opened 7 years ago this July. So I'm not going to go with the actual date, even though I know it, but most people won't even care. So yeah, I found that out that morning as well. And I was like, oh, that's cool, because I was wondering this with all the construction. And then I finally got put in the cash machine, so for both culinary and guest services. So yeah, I got access now. And IT already got my information set up with getting on their computer system, so that was also awesome as well. And of course, I remembered all my register training from the Ark Encounter, but it's nice to be able to do the register at the Creation Museum now. But by Friday night, oh my word, I was not feeling well. We were on our way to go see Mary Poppins for a school play. I honestly would have loved to film it because it was so good, but I also didn't want to film it around my family and go, why are you filming that? Like, you're not supposed to be filming that kind of thing. So I was like, I'm just not going to bother. And I got so sick that evening. I'm just like, my eyes started itching. They started getting watery. I was like sneezing like crazy. And my nose started dripping. I was like, oh no. So I was like, well, let me see how I feel by the morning. And I kept waking up that night and I'm like, this is not good. So come Saturday morning, about 7, I had, some energy, but I didn't have a lot. And I was like, well, I probably should do the right thing and just call out. So I called out. I went through all the procedures, and I went right back to sleep again. Just hold that thought for 1 minute. Sorry, responding to Katie. She finally responded. She's at work right now, so that's also why I'm home. She works every single Sunday night. Other than 2 weeks from today, she will be actually off, but that's because we're going to be in North Carolina 2 weeks from today. But I'm getting to that. So that's also why Sundays usually are the perfect day for me to do live streams. However, though, with things starting to open back up again for the year, I have decided that next Sunday will be my last time doing live streams for a while. Now, if that doesn't mean that I'm going to just be done with live streams altogether. Sometimes I might do a live stream on a Sunday. Sometimes I might just do a YouTube video. Sometimes I might just, let's just not film today, that kind of thing. But anyway, let's go back to the catching up thing. So Saturday, I was just sick all day. I had no energy. I didn't even have the energy to brush my teeth or even eat for hours. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, I was like, well, I finally have the energy to go get up and eat something and also brush my teeth. And Katie, of course, was off on Saturday, and she finally got home a little bit ago. Well, not this past Saturday, but the Saturday before that. So she had asked me to come over that evening, and she asked me, can you go to the grocery store with me? So I actually was feeling well enough, so I walked around the entire grocery store with her and helped her for groceries, but I didn't get close to her or anything. And then I pretty much just went home after that. I was feeling so sick, I didn't even shower in the kitchen sink because for the past 3 months, we've been under the impression that the only shower we've had is the kitchen sink, forgetting completely we live in front of the clubhouse, and there are 2 showers in there, and they're completely private and available for us to use. So we never once thought, oh, let's just walk over and go use the shower. So that was hilarious. Last Sunday, we went to lunch with my aunt, uncle, and Katie joined us. And I was feeling a lot better, but I still had a runny nose all day. I was still feeling sneezy and all that. And then by that afternoon, I was feeling a little better. I still wasn't feeling great. And my dad, and my brother all went and saw the new Shazam movie. I wouldn't say it's as good as the original. It had its moments. It was good, but it's not excellent. But I definitely enjoyed it. And I'm glad I saw it. Would I see it again? Not anytime soon, if that's what you're wondering. So, as far as the weather goes, the weather has actually gotten warmer out, which is great. And yet, you're probably wondering, so David, why are you in a hoodie? Well, this is my comfy outfit. I like to wear this blue hoodie and I like to wear my sweats. That doesn't mean I always am in these, but it's just what I feel comfortable in. So, as far as like upcoming YouTube videos, before I get into the actual topic, finally, you're probably wondering, so what's going to be coming up? Well, as you already know, in exactly 2 weeks, I will be in North Carolina. So, to be more specific, today is March 26th, 7 years ago today. I went with my brother to Universal Orlando, and we saw REO Speedwagon. Okay, that feels a lot better. And 10 days from now, Katie and I will be, well, almost 9 now, we'll be leaving for North Carolina. And we'll be stopping at Buc-ee's in Richmond, as well as the new one in Sevierville, Tennessee. And then we'll be getting on the interstate heading towards Asheville, North Carolina. And then we'll just keep going east until we get towards the Wilson area, basically, which is just 90 minutes southwest, I guess, but south for sure of Raleigh. So that's exactly where we're going to be heading in exactly 10 days. And we'll be out in that area for 5 days. Plan A as of right now is for our 10-month anniversary, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow, to be specific. We're going to be heading to the beaches in North Carolina with Katie's dad. And we're also going to go to the aquarium. Katie's mom is going to stay behind and clean. And plan B is just to go up to Raleigh. So if ends up raining, so I'll be keeping track of the weather as well as Katie. We both think a lot alike. I'm not sure if anybody knew that. Also, I should mention 3 weeks from today, I will be going back to Kings Island for the first time this year. So I have about 2 weeks before I plan on buying myself a season pass for the year. And preferably the gold, of course. I don't do the platinum or anything because I don't go to all the other parks or anything like some people I know. But anyway, I'll be going to Kings Island for the year and for the first time this year, and I'm going to be checking out everything that is at least open, checking out the construction going on Adventureport, the brand new land. And let's see here, what else is coming up this month? I should say not don't, but I can't really think of anything else at this time. But the two big ones at this time are the North Carolina trip and, of course, Kings Island, which I'm not going on actual opening day. I decided that I wanted to work that day, which is why I'm on the schedule. Besides, that would only be 3 days I would be working that week. And honestly, why would I take an additional day off when I'm always off on Sundays? Except for the summer when I'm off every other Sunday. So it makes no sense to take an additional day off when I can just go the very next day when it's a lot quieter. Not to mention, it also will give me the opportunity to, I'm trying to think of the right word to say, it'll give me the opportunity to still go that afternoon. It will still be open and it'll be closing a little earlier, which is nice, which means that I don't have to deal with as many crowds, which once again correlates back to it'll be quieter. The other nice thing about the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter being closed on Sundays this year rather than during the summer when I have to work every other Sunday is the fact that, let's say I want to go to Halloween Haunt this fall. So the nice thing is of course, we'll go to Halloween Haunt at least a couple of times. Once at the very beginning, just to see the Halloween Haunt crowds, like opening weekend crowds, and then I don't mind if I'm out late that night because I'm going to be going to church the next morning, and then I always have the afternoon to sleep in. And then the other nice thing is, during this fall, I'll have the opportunity to attend Tricks and Treats Festival, which I haven't done in a couple of years. So, and that's something else that I would like to do with Katie this fall, as long as she can get the time off. So that's the real question. Who knows where she's going to be working then? All right. That took me 15 minutes, so 5 minutes longer than I anticipated. But let's finally get into my discussion. So, why do I like the old Disney's Hollywood Studios better than the current one? We are referring to Disney's Hollywood Studios here and not Universal Studios. Disney's Hollywood Studios and GM Studios, whatever you want to call it. So the park first opened back in May of 1989. If you want a specific date, May 1st, 1989. When the park first opened, it was a literal film making studio. I was born 4 years after the park first opened. There were actual movies that were filmed at Disney's Hollywood Studios back in the day, like Ace Ventura, which I had an autistic classmate that told me about Ace Ventura and what a huge fan he was of the movie. So I always thought that was really neat that certain movies like that one were actually filmed. That was a very loud bird, my word. Certain movies like that one were filmed at Disney's Hollywood Studios back in the day. Like, how cool is that? I'm a huge fan of anything vintage and old fashioned and whatnot. Some of my favorite restaurants are 1950s themed, which explains why you've seen me film the restaurant Frostbite. Manny's has got an old fashioned feel to it, and you see me film that place twice. Anyway, so just a couple of examples. And I also like Universal Studios Florida better than Islands of Adventure. But I have noticed that Islands of Adventure has been getting better ever since they've been adding on some of the bigger roller coasters like Velocicoaster, for example. But we're not going to talk about that. So anyway, with Disney's Hollywood Studios, one of the rides I always enjoyed going on every single time until they took it away back in August of 2017 was the Great Movie Ride. The Great Movie Ride opened on May 1st, 1989, along with the Backlot Express. Both of those attractions were opening day attractions. So the Great Movie Ride basically took you through old-fashioned films such as Singing in the Rain, Mary Poppins, Public Enemy, and so on and so forth. I'm not naming every single one. I'm just going to name a few. And it basically puts you right in the middle of the movie. And I thought that was like the neatest thing about that ride. Now, as far as Backlot Express goes, and I'm not referring to the backlot, restaurant by any means that still exists that's next to Star Tours. I'm actually referring to the old ride featuring Catastrophe Canyon that is basically now Toy Story Land. Best way to put it. So, anyway, yeah, Catastrophe Canyon, if you think about it, that's all Toy Story Land now. Anyway, so back when the Backlot Express first opened, there was no Pearl Harbor Attack or Harbor Attack at all. It was a completely different show. Do I remember it offhand? No. But it's not like I can't Google search it or whatever. But years later, they decided, well, the old pre-show is getting boring or whatever. So let's just replace it with Harbor Attack. Harbor Attack, I actually got to be an extra on one time. So since, I'm just one person here, they're like, okay, we need one person as an extra. And I was like, oh, I'll do it. So they're like, okay, perfect. So come with us. I don't know if I've ever told this story before. So they took me backstage and they're like, okay, so we need you to put on this, big rain suit. I'm like, okay, cool. So Of course, this was back then when we had flip phones, so I have no photo evidence or anything like that, unfortunately. Otherwise, I show Katie in a heartbeat. And of course, flip phones, you can't, transfer those photos to the internet. And they're not the best way. In flip phones, you really can't appreciate, looking. Oh, nice. Thank you for the thumbs up. So you can't really appreciate, looking at a photo on a flip phone. That's the best way to put it. So we just made the best of it as we could. So, I go backstage and they put me in this big rain suit and they're like, okay, so here's what's gonna happen. You're going to sit down in a chair. There's gonna be a phone next to you, it doesn't actually work. You're gonna pick up the phone, can you act? I'm like, oh yeah, I got years of experience. All right, I got three people. And they're like, okay, so you're gonna take the phone, you're gonna put up to your ear, and you're gonna basically be or pretend to have a conversation with the engineer. And I'm like, okay, because you're supposed to be like on the top of the boat. And I'm like, all right. So, I'm, listening to these instructions. They're like, oh, by the way, at one point, you're going to have 80 gallons of water dumped on you all at once. And I'm like, wonderful. Right. Okay. So I'm like dreading slash wondering when the water is going to be dumped on me because I mean, I've seen the show, but I have no way of actually knowing when the water is going to be dumped on me because it's not like I'm going to just step up, take a look outside my little shack and go, oh, cool, 80 gallons of water is coming at me. Great. So I'm, sitting in there. They've got the cameras rolling, and I'm having this conversation with the engineer. So I'll react it for you. I'm just like, here, let me use my actual phone. I'm like, best way to put it. So, I'm using my hand movements. I'm like opening and closing my mouth a bunch of times to make it look like I'm actually talking. And I'm looking all over the place. And next thing I know, and of course, the whole time I'm looking forward because I'm looking at the cameras and I'm also knowing that there's going to be a lot of water, about 80 gallons, coming at me from the left. And it all just hit me at the same exact time. And I'm just like, wow. And then their favorite line they like to say is, no, you just need to sit there and just act dry. And I'm thinking to myself, right. But what really surprised me also after, the whole thing was said and done, they take me back to where I put on the rain suit in the first place. I take off. I was still completely dry. I was like, wow, maybe like a couple of drops on me, but wow, that was one protective suit. And then I just went and caught up with Jonathan, and he showed me the picture. It looked pretty good for a flip phone. Of course, these days with smartphones, you can do a whole lot better. And I'm sure there were people in the audience that had smartphones, but we didn't have smartphones back then. Not Jonathan or I. And that's when Lightsmith's Action was around. So we're talking early 2000s here. Maybe later. I don't remember. But I will tell you guys this, and this has nothing really to do with the topic, but for the longest time, when our dad used to get us into Disney, we would ride with him to Animal Kingdom, right? We would wait outside of the entrance for him, or I would, whichever. And then he would meet us up at the front. He'd get us in. We would walk with him for about 5-10 minutes. Sometimes I would stay in the park and go ride Dinosaur or go ride Everest. And then I would head over to the bus loop and I go find whichever bus I wanted to take. So if I felt like going to Magic Kingdom, I go to the Magic Kingdom bus and so on and so forth. And the buses are completely free. You're bypassing the parking, and all you have to do is show your guest pass, well, your ticket. But for me, it was my guest pass, and so I would scan the pass on I went. So the only catch for me was I had to make sure that I was back in the cast member parking lot by like 5:30, 6 p.m. So I was constantly watching the time all day long, making sure I was back on time. And to my knowledge, I don't believe I was ever late getting back, which is why my dad always allowed my brother and I, or just me, to just up and leave. Were things better when I had a car? Of course, because of the fact that I was able to like go get lunch somewhere else besides eating in the park or packing a lunch. Like, say for example, I felt like going over to CC's, which is 5 minutes from Animal Kingdom. I went to CC's, so that was great. And I will tell you this: Jonathan and I went to Hollywood Studios the most during the summer because of Star Wars weekends, but that has nothing to do with the discussion. Once again, so also, why is Disney's Hollywood Studios my favorite, or why was the old Disney's Hollywood Studios my favorite park? So back then, believe it or not, over by Backlot Express featuring Catastrophe Canyon, there was a nod to an old Disney movie called Splash. Is that movie on Disney Plus? I don't know. I haven't actually checked yet. But that movie did feature forget his name offhand as start oh my word. Why is my mind drawing a blank on this? Tom Hanks, that's right. That movie did feature Tom Hanks in it, which I thought was really neat. But they had a water fountain. I should say not they have, but they had a water fountain, and they had a little plaque on the water fountain that talked about the movie Splash, and I thought that was a really neat nod to the movie that came out like years ago. The only water fountain that is left in the park that has any nod to any movie franchise at all is in the Muppets Courtyard. But the real question is, how much longer is Disney going to keep the Muppets around? The Muppet Vision 3D, that is. But as of right now, the Muppets is still around. So for a long time, my brother and I, when we got into Disney's Hollywood Studios, that is, we would eat at this covered outdoor food and quick service outdoor quick service food and beverage restaurant called Studio Catering Company. And this restaurant was more on what's now called the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge side. Notice how I'm referencing everything to the current Disney's Hollywood Studios, so everybody knows, oh, that's exactly where it was at. I would say this restaurant probably right where it is currently, or where it was is currently where Rise of the Resistance is at. That's the best way to put it. Maybe a little closer to where the new section that just came in, that's just before the entrance to Galaxy's Edge. I don't remember the name of that section offhand, but more than likely that is where Studio Catering Company was. That restaurant closed down back in 2014, 9 years ago. So when we did go to Studio Catering Company, my word, they sold Coke products, of course, and they sold all kinds of different sandwiches and wraps, for that matter, and salads. So it was a very healthy restaurant. But I love this restaurant because it was completely outside, and the fact that it was completely covered by an awning. So there was no chance of you getting wet during a rainstorm whatsoever. And they really didn't care if Jonathan or I, or both of us for that matter, would show up with like a packed lunch and just chill out there and like in the corner, for example, and just eat or chow down on our public sub or whatever, or whatever we just felt like bringing that day. So that was a huge plus about that. Now, we didn't always eat there. So back then, ABC Commissary on Commissary Lane was, believe it or not, a quick service restaurant. So when we first used to go to ABC Commissary, they would have, well, the entrance that you know now, and then they would have condiment stations on both the left and the right side. And then you would go up and you could order burgers, sandwiches, fries, salads. They also had a really good barbecue pulled pork sandwich that you could order, and you would order from the counter, and then they had dining room tables on both the left and the right. So the neat thing about the left was that was of course where the restrooms were at, but get this, the left side where the restrooms are at is also super close to Sci-Fi Dining Theater. And if that's not something, Sci-Fi Dining Theater and ABC Commissary did and still do to this day share the same restrooms. Crazy, right? Like, who would have guessed that one? So the next time you're in ABC Commissary eating your sit-down meal, which is exactly what that restaurant is now, a sit-down restaurant, and you just happen to use a restroom, and let's say the next time you go to Sci-Fi Dining Theater too, and you just happen to use a restroom, just, remember, you're sharing the same restroom as the restaurant next door. Neat, right? Little Easter egg for you. So I always found that really neat. And ironically, that's the same exact restaurant where my close friend Artem pulled the dumbest joke ever, which was very offensive and insulting, but I took that as a joke only. So we're sitting there, we're eating a pack lunch, because back then we used to bring pack lunches in there if it was like really hot. And this was after Studio Catering Company went away. So we were like, oh, well, might as well go eat over at ABC Commissary instead. And I'm very sure I had packed a public sub that day, and I was just like woofing down the thing. And then Artem says to me, or Artem said to everybody, save some for David. He'll starve. There are starving children in Africa who know that David is starving. And I'm like, okay. Just like, that's offensive. But whatever. But as I said, I took that only as a joke, and that's it. Obviously I'm laughing about it, so I obviously think it's funny, and that's it. I won't talk for too much longer. I don't want to take another hour-long live stream, I promise. Half an hour at the most. So anyway, why else did I love Disney's Hollywood Studios so much? Let's go away from the food and beverage for a little bit. So there was a stunt show called Lights, Murders, Action. Let's talk about that. That opened back in 2005. So 2005 is one of those time periods that I like to call Disney's golden era. And I think even Disney even acknowledged that. That Magic Kingdom got Cinderella Celebration, Epcot got Soarin', Hollywood Studios got Lights, Murders, Action, and Animal Kingdom got Everest. That's right. Animal Kingdom got Expedition Everest in 2005. So if you think about it, Soaring and Expedition Everest turn 18 years old this year. Wait till 2025, and then they turn 2 decades old. As of 2025, crazy, right? So 2005 is definitely one of those more memorable years for me, and that's the reason why. But anyway, so Lights, Murders, Action originally opened back in 2005. It's a stunt show that came all the way from Paris, France. If you have seen the show, the stunt show that is, you probably wondered why there is so much Paris references, French references as well, all throughout the entire show. It's because the show was originally meant or made for Paris, France, Disneyland Paris, which is exactly where the show originally originated. And then they decided, let's bring it over to Orlando. Why not? And For about, we'll say about 5 years or so, 5, 6 years, the show did incredible. There was a little portion of the show where Herbie, the love bug, would come out, and I felt like that's when the show was at its in its heyday, and then it started getting old. So Disney was like, "Well, the show's getting old. Let's try changing it up just a little bit." They didn't want to change the stunt show too much, so they just said, "Well, let's replace Herbie with Lightning McQueen." Okay, for the first year or two, it really worked well, especially because Cars 2 had just came out back in the late 2000s, before the 2010s. So for like the first 2 years, it did excellent, and then that got old too, and then the show started going down, and the show was barely getting attention. If you also remember Lights, Motors, Action, the show was designed to hold at least 10,000 people, at least. They were expecting the show to get huge numbers. They could have easily filmed Epic over there, Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, that is. But they decided not to. They were like, it's good right where it is. And I still, question why Disney even brought this car stunt show over to Hollywood Studios in the first place. Because if you remember, when Hollywood Studios first opened, that whole area was residential street. So if you've ever seen like some of the older movies, not Disney movies specifically, but like older movies in general, and you've ever seen those like houses like where the actors are coming out and they're standing out in their front yard or on their driveway or they're in front of their mailbox, that was probably filmed right there on Residential Street. Or that just gives you an idea of what those kind of houses look like, those kind of sets. The fronts of the houses are all fake. Best way to put it, when a movie is filmed, there is usually an area where they film the entire and like let's just say like they need to shoot in front of a house, they film that in one particular area. Whenever they're filming inside of a house, they film that in a completely different area, and then whenever they film behind a house, they film that in another completely different area. And I can promise you this, filming usually takes place over a couple of years. It's very rare where it's done in a short amount of time. So that was something I found neat about Residential Street, because it gave you an idea of how filming in front of a house looked. And then they had to basically gut it out with Lights, Motors, Action. And, that took, a lot of space. And then Catastrophe Canyon had to weave around it. And then the only thing that was even neat about Backlot Express after that was the whole area where they show you like all the behind the scenes magic that goes on inside those buildings, and then B, of course, Catastrophe Canyon. But Lights, Motors, Action just felt like a waste of space. So I was not surprised back in April of 2014 when the show went. And I was like, well, there, I saw that one coming from a million miles. I mean, yeah, I was sad about Lights, Motors, Action closing, but was I surprised? No, not at all, to be honest. I mean, the show was good while it lasted, but it really was not a show meant to stay. And of course, the whole reason why they got rid of Lights, Motors, Action, to make way for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Well, there's a shock. Believe it or not, also, back to the whole old Disney's Hollywood Studios, you used to be able to go to Pizza Planet at Disney's Hollywood Studios, which is why you might sometimes run into people at Disney World wearing Pizza Planet t-shirts, Where did they get them from? Disney's Hollywood Studios, back when there actually was a Pizza Planet there. They decided that Pizza Planet just did not belong at Hollywood Studios anymore for whatever reason. Keeping up with the Muppets theme, they decided, well, let's just retheme the entire restaurant and change up the food a little bit, and we'll call the place Pizza Rizzo. And go figure, I would eat at that place after the whole theme and name change. So yes, I've eaten at Pizza Rizzo, never ate at Pizza Planet. Sad, isn't it? I'm disappointed, trust me. I wish I had gone to Pizza Planet like everybody else did. How unfair. But then again, it's my own fault. I have no one to blame but myself, so I don't even know why I'm yelling out unfair and all that. But anyway, speaking of changes, Rock and Roller Coaster wasn't originally built with Hollywood Studios back in the day. There was nothing there. And then Tower of Terror, well, that ride's changed at least 3 or 4 times ever since the ride first came out back in the 90s. The ride didn't even open with the park. That's right, it came out after the fact. And when the ride first opened, there was only one drop. What version are we on now? Like 3, 4? I don't remember now, but all the drops are all completely randomized by computer now, which I think is hilarious. And have you ever wondered why the sound effects for the drop sequence are so loud? I've actually done a backstage tour on this ride without the sound. It's because the motors raising the elevator thingamajigger that you're in up and down are so loud that they needed to turn up the sound in that area loud enough for you not to hear it. And this is just a given any day you go in there. There is absolutely no ventilation whatsoever in that 5th dimension, that elevator shaft, which explains why it's either super hot in there or super cold in there. There is no in between whatsoever. The one thing I can guarantee you is it ain't gonna rain in there, unless for whatever reason the wind decided to blow the rain this way, but that would be almost impossible. So I didn't say it's impossible. I just said it's almost impossible. As far as I know, I've never gotten wet in that elevator shaft before. So, and I rode that ride for almost 17 years. That ride I first started riding when I was 13 years old, and then not that this has anything to do with the discussion. I first started riding Mission Space when I was 18, so that was almost 12 years ago. And yet I'm almost 30 and I still haven't rode Astro Orbiter, so I obviously haven't rode every single Disney ride out there. Fantasmic, as far as I know, did not also open with the park, but they had to build that over by the parking lot just to find the space for it. And you're probably wondering, well, why didn't they just replace whatever you call it, Lightsummer's Action with it? Because then we wouldn't have Galaxy's Edge now, would we? See, Disney intentionally put Fantasmic where it was so that, you know, they could still keep it, and that way it wouldn't interfere with the rest of the park. And here's another question. Is Disney ever going to expand that direction? Personally, I can foresee Disney doing more with Lightning McQueen Racing Academy and the new Pixar Place. But at this time, I don't foresee Disney doing anything new with that whole section where Fantasmic is at right now. And I'll be honest with you, Pixar Place, when it originally opened, which is where the Incredibles section is right now, that was only meant to be a temporary thing because, excuse me, that also opened back in 2005 as well. And Toy Story Mania was the very first portion of Toy Story Land to come out, but Disney had no intention of a Toy Story Land until years later, which is also why it had the entrance that it did. That's also why it was in the right building that it was in. Have you ever wondered why it went from the big glass building to where it is now? Because there was no Toy Story Land back then. So Disney basically just took the original queue line and moved it a little bit. Not much because they no longer need people to enter from the side that they were on, and then they had people entering from the other side. That's why it almost looks like you're going through a mirror the first little bit. So I would say the first 25% of the current Toy Story Mania line is now brand new. And that's why it seems like a mirror. And then that's basically to catch you up with the remainder of the line where it originally was. And from that point forward, everything is the same. And also, it kind of worked out that they moved everything because of the fact that they made that second track because the ride is so popular that they needed another track. Now, personally, I would like to see them do something about Slinky Dog Dash because that ride is constantly getting bombarded by people, and they only have one track for that. If you think about it, Toy Story Mania has two tracks. Alien Swirling Saucers has two sides. So what are they going to do about Slinky Dog Dash? Like, really? And here comes the other funny thing. When I first worked at Disney's Hollywood Studios, that's when all the construction was first going on. So Toy Story Land had just literally opened. Actually, no, Toy Story Land wasn't even a thing yet. I apologize. Toy Story Land was still in the process when I first started working at Hollywood Studios. Toy Story Land was not officially a thing yet. Great Movie Ride was still around, believe it or not. And Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was still a bit in the distance. But all the construction had already started a few years prior. So what did people do with their time? Well, Disney decided, well, let's put all the emphasis on the other parks, or at Hollywood Studios, let's just try to turn it into a half-day park. We'll let people use this place to basically spend all their money on food and beverage and alcohol. And I found that really depressing because of the fact that I always found Hollywood Studios a very enjoyable park back then. I mean, don't get me wrong, there were times when I would go to Hollywood Studios and I'd get bored and I'd be like, oh, I might as well go waste 45 minutes on Backlot Express because I have nothing else better to do. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are still, some things that are still there from back then, but I don't know. I miss the old Hollywood Studios. I mean, even Stars Weekends ended back in 2015. That was almost 8 years ago. And the whole reason why they got rid of it, why have Star Wars Weekends when it could be Star Wars Day every day? Ever since Disney acquired the rights to Star Wars, everything changed. Well, with that being said, I will see you guys in the next vlog. And always remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Have a great day. Peace out.